We are now broadcasting, so welcome anybody who's watching online. I'm flying solo tonight, so bear with me because I'm trying to manage flipping the cameras back and forth to optimize for people who might be watching online or watch later, and also handling the agenda. So if I get a little discombobulated, my apologies. Arkady had a conflict. He let me know that he wouldn't be able to make it tonight. Again, welcome. Happy New Year, everybody. Since this is our first full rock meeting with the entire new crew, after the public comment period, I'd like to go around. There may be more people coming in, so I don't want to miss anybody. We'll go around and introduce everybody. So I know some people were here in December and able to join us for that sort of informal meet and greet. If there's time at the end, we can do more of introductions, questions and answers about the rock and things in general. But for the moment, let's start off with public comment. Oh, sorry, before I do public comments, I want to sort of jump back to something that a prior general manager of the T instituted, which is sort of a safety briefing. And if I'm not mistaken, the three important points were: first, is anybody here qualified, certified for CPR? Great, thank you very much. If I'm not mistaken, the AED that's closest is in the guard's booth right outside if anybody needs resuscitation. If we have to evacuate the building for any reason, our muster point will be outside by the Dunkin' Donuts, but outside the building. And just for a safety check, I think the only cords that might be a trip hazard are this one right here that's my fault, going to that camera in the back. So if anybody needs to go into the projector, and when our guest gets here, I'll make sure that she watches out for that cable. Anyone want to speak from the public? You can do it later if you want, Barry, but feel free. Okay. Barry mentioned a very interesting bus operations point that I hope he'll share with us. So now that, go ahead.
Point of order. I would suggest that he go now just to give Tegan, our guest, a little more time to get here.
I'll go with that, sure. Do you mind, Barry?
What's this?
Do you mind going now instead? Since we have the time now, we're already ahead of schedule unless you want to talk now. Feel free.
Barry Steinberg, Association for Public Transportation. I live in Quincy, and because of all the construction and turmoil, especially in Quincy Center Station, it was planned that two of the bus routes would be rerouted. Instead of going to Quincy Center, they'd go to Quincy Adams, which is the next stop south. The only problem is that many people make connections at Quincy Center Station from bus to bus. And for some reason, I gather that some people were unhappy about one of the routes, the 230 that goes to part of Brockton, Monticello. And that was supposed to be cut back to Quincy Adams, but it reverted to its regular route. Now, with the other one, the 238 that goes from Quincy to Randolph and sometimes Avon, the first trips, I was told by a bus driver, people make connections from the Germantown and Housing and want to make the first train. I mean the first bus, rather, to get to South Shore Plaza. And I mentioned to Mr. Gupta, who was of T operations planning about that, and he said he'd look into it. And I'd like to thank him because about 3 weeks later, the first two trips were rerouted so that they left from Quincy Center Station, so presumably people could make their connections. And this happened after the timetable, after the new rating, which involves a bit of schedule ledger domain. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Barry. Anyone else want to speak from the public or any other comments in general before we start with the formal part?
Maybe I should just add on to that.
Please do.
The plan is, as Barry mentioned, the 230 is now running out of Quincy Center. The 238, the first two trips, as Barry mentioned, are running out of Quincy Center as opposed to Quincy Adams to provide that connection to bus routes out of Quincy Center. In the spring rating, the 238, Route 238 is going to go back to Quincy Center, so we're completely turning it back to what it used to be. And just, we hope we have enough capacity in the busway to do that.
Thanks, Rob. I guess at this point, before we get into the subcommittee reports, a few more people came in, so let's do introductions. I'll start, we'll go around clockwise. I'm Stefan Wunsch. I'm one of the two co-chairs of the committee. Arkady is unable to be here tonight. He had a conflict. I'm a Lynn resident and mostly on commuter rail with whatever connection from the North Station to Harvard Square is the best in a particular day.
Jeff Murray, I'm a grad student at UMass Boston. Lynn resident.
Mimi Gadet. I live in Cambridge and I share a lot of train facts with everyone that I know all the time.
I'm one of the co-chairs for the Capital Investment Finance Subcommittee. I live in Arlington. I use bus 77, Red Line a lot.
My name is Andy Rieker. I'm with CTPS. Live in Somerville, so I'm on the bus, the 80s and 87 and CT2. A number of buses a lot, and then the Red Line, Green Line, or Orange Line.
My name is Robert Guptill. I'm the manager of service planning at the MBTA. I live in Roslindale, where there's a lot of transit there. I take commuter rail, I take the Orange Line, I take all the buses that come in and out of Roslindale.
Hi everybody, I'm Sophie Pothurst. I am a member and I am a senior at Northeastern University. I'm going to be staying in Massachusetts, working in Mansfield next year. Not really sure where I'm living yet, but currently I live right by Northeastern, so Ruggles, Mass Ave, Orange Line. I took the 43 here because the bus stop's right outside of my apartment. Take the Silver Line to South Station, right in the middle of it all.
I'm Amy Locke. I live in the South End. In the mornings, because I work in South Station, I walk down to Back Bay and take the commuter rail for that quick ride to South Station, which is wonderful, and it's free for now at least. For now at least. And then coming home, I generally take the Orange Line, and I use the T all the time, all over the place.
I'm Jessie Saki. I live in Cambridge. I work in the South End, so I'm eternally on the bus. I'm very interested that Tegan is coming tonight to talk about bus priority. And although I do have a car, I mostly get around on public transportation.
Hi, I'm Melissa Kimball. I live in JP. I work right next to South Station. I take all modes of transit, commuter rail into Providence a lot. Very frustrated that the last train from Providence to Boston on Saturdays is at 10 p.m. It's totally ridiculous. Can't see a show. And yeah, into all modes of transit.
Hey, my name is Ryan. I'm working at Eastern. I'm also the Government Public Affairs co-op right now with MassDOT. So I'll be the guy in the room with the nice want to take notes. That's fun. I live right on the Eastern, but before I mentioned close to the Orange Line a lot, and a lot. I live in Providence, so I'm out in the out there a lot myself as well. And I have my country team, so we rely on it kind of all over the day. Most keep the data.
Hi, my name is Brian. I'm with Len. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Capital Investment Finance Subcommittee, and I live in the South End.
I'm Carl Seglin, and live in Brighton. Spend a lot of time on buses, some Green Line, some Red Line, some Orange Line.
Wig Zaymore, Somerville resident. I live about a mile from Green Line, Orange Line, and Red Line, which seems kind of odd since I'm in the densest half of the densest city in New England. Right on Highland Ave, so I can take the bus if I'm going east-west. My biggest interest is actually in electric, clean, rail-based transit, and like buses, try to promote walking and biking a lot too locally.
I'm Karen Websick. I live in Jamaica Plain. I'm on the 39 bus every single day of the week, plus all the other things. I do things all over town, and I try to do it, figure out which bus or which green line or orange line will get me there best. And I am a mature person, so I have a $30 a month senior T-Pass, so the rides are essentially free. Just so you know, when you make it to 65, you can ride for $30 a month.
I still think you're cheating. There's no way you're 65. I don't believe it. Thank you, everybody. Let's start off with Capital Investment and Finance Standing Committee reports.
Sure.
Or we can go on to marketing communications if you need another minute. Actually, since Craig and Brad aren't here yet, we may be punting on the...
Brad's not coming.
Okay.
He has a conflict.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about Craig. Craig usually comes late.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll punt that.
Well, I think
we'll see.
We'll just
play by ear.
So, well, let me just go from memory. So, unfortunately, our guest wasn't able to make it, but we talked about capital selection process. Anyways, the guest it's just been postponed. I mean, it's a complicated reason. He's spoken with us several times. He's very much into the group and talking to the group, and so it was beyond his control that led him not to be able to meet with us. My sense is that we're hoping to get him in the next couple months. My sense, though, is that there is a different or more rigid protocol for the public engagement part of the capital selection process, and so it may be a while before we can get him to talk with us about how they selected the capital projects for this cycle. But anyways, he did point us to the capital project committee, which I really wasn't aware of, but they are an interesting group, and so we are going to start paying more attention to them. What he did make clear to me, and it is public, is that they are using the project selection advisory committee recommendations for how they go about selecting projects. And I know the highway was using those criteria, but it's now clear that, or at least it's been stated, that the T is using those. So it'll be interesting in this current cycle to see how they score the various projects, because I have not seen those scores applied to the projects. And that's not to say that they aren't. We just haven't seen them, so I'm hoping that in this next round of public engagement, they will make the scores for projects as available as they seem to be for the highway project selections, or the projects that are selected for highway. And let me rephrase that, because even if a project is selected, it gets a score. And so seeing that score will give you some insights as to how the project's selected, and also seeing the scores give you a sense of why certain projects are even brought to the table. So that's that on capital selection. The other thing we talked about was, well, one of the goals that we are going to pursue was suggested by Wig. He brought it up about 6 months ago. Mostly revolves around the lack of bigness, would we say, Wig, and the Focus 40 outlook. I
think
like what?
Bigness.
Yeah.
So, since the Big Dig, and I think some of you probably the Big Dig predates some of you probably at this point, but the state spent $24 billion on it in those times, so it would be a lot more money now. $17 billion was in excess of the federal reimbursement, so that really crippled the ability to do other large transportation projects in Eastern Mass especially. And obviously the results are beautiful, but in today's terms, that $17 billion that the population spent would probably be $30 billion. And you could build a heck of a good transit system for $30 billion. So, and I think between the age of the system, and Boston's one of the big U.S. cities with an old aging going, and the amount of money that we spent on the big dig, folks have been forced to focus on a state of good repair and just keeping the system going. And so I think some of the planning has reflected what I would call a small ball strategy instead of kind of going for home runs. And I certainly don't want anybody to waste money, but I also think that if you look at other comparably sized cities in Western Europe and they rely a lot more on transit for a lot more people than we do. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get back to thinking about somewhat larger and more transformative transit projects.
Right. And so on the assumption that there will be no or very little desire on the part of MBTA to do this, means that they will have just wrapped up in the Focus 40 initiative, that it will be incumbent upon us to pursue that, and so we'll look into ways to pursue that. And probably by the time we get up some momentum on that, we will have seen, the results of the Focus 40 project. And so it may very well turn out, that there are some bigger things in it that we didn't see there, but
yeah. And one additional comment: if you think outside of transportation, when you don't have a facile transportation that really gets to a lot of the region, it has a lot of secondary effects like housing. Huge housing prices locally where the convenient transportation is. And if you look at Cambridge or downtown Boston or Back Bay, Longwood Medical, I think some of the housing crunch and the housing affordability issue is just because of the time of travel for people to get to housing in communities where the housing is a lot more affordable. So I think that there's a lot of land use and transportation connection in that formula as well.
And another reason you brought it up too was that in case we got a lot of unexpected money, if you don't have the projects selected or thought about it, it's hard to spend the money. And as we all know, we're probably going to get like a huge infrastructure project that will probably add $100 trillion to deficit. So we'll have probably $10 trillion to spend on transit here. So we should have those projects all ready to go. So.
And I think many of you probably realize that Massachusetts was both the largest state, all of whose area was in violation of the ozone regulations for the longest time in the country, but also the state that shifted highway money early to transportation. So the red line improvements and the orange line, which I know is a little bit controversial because of its location, but the orange and red lines were really a result of that early shift and leadership by Boston metropolitan area population and leaders toward transit and away from highway. So it would be a precedent that we've had.
All right, what was that regulation?
Well, the major air pollution regulations since 1970 have been in particulate matter, which has the most health effects by far, and in ozone. So ozone causes people to be short of breath. It can exacerbate asthma. It tends not to cause mortality the way particles do. But because we're kind of at the end of the Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Boston kind of megalopolis, and the air flows that way, we have a lot of secondary air pollution here. Not all of it originating here. And I'll stop after a second, but the perfect formula for creating ozone is to take a whole lot of transportation pollution and let it bake over a body of water and then go ashore. So like Long Island or Cape Cod have a very hard time, even though they're not the source of it. But we're also at the end of kind of two streams, the population dense northeastern economy and then the power plants from the kind of northern Midwest as well. They both kind of came this way. So it's very hard for Massachusetts to, by itself, meet the federal ozone standards, and they have just met them. so the last state in the country to have the whole state be not in compliance with federal zone regulations, Massachusetts.
So I will save our discussion for the Regional Transportation Advisory Council for outside reports, although if Tegan isn't here, by the time we've finished the operations report, then I'll report on that. The other reason is that it'll give me more time to access it. So we talked about some of the slide decks that were relevant. In particular, there was a report on Keolis, and they noted that the revenues were up 3.8% for October year over year. There was seemingly an association with that and the new Fair is Fair campaign. In reading the deck, I didn't see more detailed analysis to get a sense of whether how fares are increasing over the system overall, and so to compare the fare increase for the commuter rail lines to the revenue increases to the overall system, and whether or not they could isolate whether or not there was enhanced revenue collection at the places where they were doing more enforcement of the fare collection. But hey, I mean, 3.8% is good. So that was that, and let's see.
Actually, Glenn, a quick question about the fare collection.
Yeah.
Just maybe bordering on an operation thing, but since you mentioned Keolis and the fare collection, have you maybe heard anything about the staff that were doing ticket checks at North Station? Because they're no longer at North Station. It was a cadre of like 18 people who were checking passes before boarding. They're all cleared out. There's no sign of any pre-board checking anymore. I'm wondering if they went to Back Bay or South Station.
No.
Okay.
No. Okay, so when did they clear out?
Maybe about 2-3 weeks ago. Maybe right around the end of December, I think.
Yeah.
They may have moved somewhere, but
yeah, no, I don't know.
Maybe look into that in the subcommittee.
Sure. And we also discussed some new commuter rail vision, and apparently they have hired a bunch of consultants, and they're going to explore maybe what more can be done with commuter rail. And I noted, because I have to say autonomous vehicles at least once in every meeting I'm in, there was no mention of AVs, in the report. And if you're going to look out, in the long term to how commuter rail is going to be utilized, I think you really have to think about the impact of AVs on people's utilization of commuter rail. And I would be tempted to say something to them, but it's still obvious that I've kind of figured. I figure it's an oversight. Yes, I can't put everything in the report. And if it wasn't an oversight, it'll become apparent really soon that they need to look into that. So we don't need to, spend the time composing a letter and getting it approved and sending it to them. Because by the time they get it, they were like, oh yeah, we need to look into that. So, but it was an obvious oversight in the slide deck that I saw. So I'll stop there. We'll entertain questions or whatever.
Yeah, I would invite anyone, particularly a new member who hadn't gone to the first Finance and Capital Subcommittee meeting. Please ask any questions. I mean, this is the opportunity to get more familiar with that subcommittee if you weren't able to attend, or if it's not really your interest. Either way, that's fine, but take the opportunity now.
Hi.
Please.
So I won't be able to attend the Capital Finance meetings until this summer, which I'm really sad about because I'm interested in it. But I'm wondering if you talk about, new projects or, ongoing projects, like really what's the structure of that subcommittee?
Well, we're trying to get a better handle on the capital project selection process, because what happens now is that usually in April or something, we are given a capital investment plan, and we get to comment on it. But in all honesty, at that point, it's pretty much set. You can make comments, but the chances that your comments are going to have any impact are pretty much nil. So we are trying to get some access to the people who are selecting projects earlier on to understand what's going into their selection process, and if we have the knowledge, we make meaningful input into what goes into selection. And other than that, we haven't talked at all, just not today, about the operations budget. That's another one of our focus, and so that is cooking now. And usually about the same time frame we get the operations budget, and we get to make input on that. Yeah.
I was going to add, in the recording of the discussion of that Keyless presentation,
yeah,
I think members of the board asked, was that increase due to fair is fair? I don't remember the substance of it.
Yeah.
But if you're interested, or other folks are interested, go back to the recording. I'm pretty sure I remember that there was some discussion of that.
Okay.
Particular topic.
All right. Thanks.
Because our special guest Tegan is here. Am I proud to say it right?
It's Tegan.
Tegan.
I don't get offended. It's kind of our name.
Tegan is here. Would anyone object to us switching over to her part of the agenda? We'll come back to the marketing operations.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to be here.
Actually, Len, because you were arranging this with her and arranging the first to be here, do you want to give an introduction and then sort of hand it off?
Well, Tegan, tight, Bennett.
Tight. Just tight.
Okay,
yeah,
tight. Okay, tight. Well, your voicemail says.
It's still incorrect.
Okay, all right. Thank you. She is the chair of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council, which the ROC has become a formal member of late last year. And Tegan thankfully helped us out because we're trying to get the GM for today's meeting, and because the GM has to go to the State of the State address, on fairly late notice, they said they couldn't be able to make it. So it was a long shot, but Tegan graciously accepted the invitation, because I was going to try and get Tegan to come to a meeting in February or March, and so she was able to change. Well, actually, you scheduled that.
This worked out perfectly.
Huh?
This worked out perfectly, actually.
Yeah,
So.
great.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
And so she is working with the Bar Foundation on bus priority. It's unfortunate that one of our members who lives in Watertown isn't here, because I know he'd be very interested in this, but she's going to talk about what's going on with bus priority in Watertown.
And primarily in Cambridge, but we're partnering with Watertown. There's a piece of it in Watertown as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So thank you so much for the introduction, and also I'm very glad to have the Writers Oversight Committee, ROC. Am I saying right? I always forget if it's committee or.
It's ROC. Right.
We're happy to have ROC on the advisory council. I think it's a really important addition to our work. And what Leonard asked me to do today was come, and I'm really coming as a staff person for the city of Cambridge, wearing that hat, I guess, right now, to talk about this grant we got through the Bar Foundation to pilot our first real bus priority facilities in Cambridge, partnering with Watertown. So I'm a transportation planner in the Environmental and Transportation Planning Division in Cambridge. We're in the planning department. There's also a DPW and a traffic and parking. I'm on the planning side of things. So I have slides. I'm very happy for this to be conversational. If you guys just want to interrupt and make it more conversational, please feel free. But otherwise, I think it helps a little bit to tell the story for me to just kind of walk through them, because it keeps my brain in order as we talk about things.
We're a very informal group, so
Great.
I encourage people also, yeah. I mean, feel free to raise your hand, or if it's appropriate, just speak out. If I don't notice you calling you, it's pretty casual.
Great. Yes, please. Very welcome. So this is a 6-month initiative that I'm really talking about here, just so you know. So we hope to see some results actually on the ground in June. So just keep that in mind. So what we're talking about here is, hopefully it's relatively easy for people to orient. I kind of start with Harvard Square and look outward from there. Yeah, I actually do have one.
Yeah, I do have one. Okay.
I'm really bad at using these things.
You don't have to.
I like to stand up sometimes too.
Whatever works for you.
So we have, we have the 71 and the 73 here, which hopefully everyone knows are very key bus routes. Carry a lot of people. They're also the trackless trolley buses, so they're electric buses. And the
groups together and sort of a little bit of their numbers I'll talk about in a second. One of the key factors here that there are 12,000 weekday daily trips combined. That's more than I think quite a few of the commuter rail lines alone. So it's a really core bus corridor. And in particular, I know MassDOT and MBTA and us were interested in looking at where some of these kind of common corridors come together. So that most of that portion is in Cambridge. Just so you have a sense, the Cambridge line is pretty much right here at this intersection. So we're also talking about a little portion in Watertown. But Watertown is doing their own full study of Mount Auburn corridor, which is now on a tip for reconstruction. So their whole section of it is a different project that's going on right now, and it's a major reconstruction. So what I'm talking about is just a pilot project. Just to give you a little bit more of a sense of the importance of the corridor, you can see how I'm focusing more on the 71 here. How many things it connects a number of schools, it connects a number of employment centers, it connects Mount Auburn Hospital, Mount Auburn Cemetery, and all into the various squares, which are major, retail, job, living hubs. So the street itself carries 19,000 vehicles a day. If you think about the bus riders being 12,000 a day, that's actually pretty close. As I mentioned, the grant that I'm going to talk about focuses primarily on a Cambridge section. So this is Fresh Pond Parkway, and recently DCR carried out a study where they looked at making improvements all around Fresh Pond Parkway, improving pedestrian and bicycle access in particular across here. But we were able to they were able to expand their scope actually to carry out a study of the Mount Auburn corridor in this kind of boxed area as part of it. So we're kind of building off of a public process they already started, where one of the primary goals of that group was transit improvements, which is great because that matches with what we're trying to do as well in the city. So just to give you a sense of some of the cross sections, when you're closer, there's a Star Market around where this is, but you pretty much have a 4-lane cross section. In this area, you really don't have parking, so that's helpful, So in this section, you don't really have parking. You do have parking on the streets. Well, Watertown is a bit of I get confused about. There's some legal parking here. There's some funeral parking that's sort of temporarily used there, but it's a little less of a parking battle, which is a nice change, I think, for a lot of our work. This is a key thing that we're trying to communicate to everyone, and this is something they put together in the DCR study. That's something that we want to work with the Bar Foundation's team, communications team, to make this even more compelling if we can. The key thing is that I mentioned how many people were on the bus. At one point on the corridor, you actually have more people on the bus than you do in private vehicles. So really, you have, this kind of shows that there are more people on the bus out of the total, but the MBTA buses, of course, are only taking up a tiny portion of the space on the roadway. So all of that congestion is affecting more than half the people on the roadway who are on the bus. I know I don't have to sell you guys, I'm sure, on any of that stuff, but I'm just making a point that this is part of the core messaging that we're trying to get out there and trying to get people to understand. And then I also wanted to mention that we have done an actual analysis to help support this as well. So we worked with a consultant. It's actually, I used to work for that consultant, and I transitioned in the middle of this project from the consultant to the city. So I know this very well. But we took a bunch of T data, and we did some calculations to determine measures for delay and unreliability. And I think CTPS is now, doing very similar work, probably using slightly different calculations. This was done back in 2014. But we identified locations across the city that were hot spots for these combined measures of where lots of people are riding, you have high delay and high unreliability. And so this is one of the worst places in the city. And again, if this isn't totally obvious, it's a different look. This is Fresh Pond Parkway. So it's really in the morning, inbound peak, as they approach that signal at Fresh Pond Parkway. If any of you have been out there, the buses can literally be stuck in that traffic for 10 minutes. So it literally will double your travel time. Go ahead, yeah,
Without going into too deep of the detail, but can you give us a sense for what the A through F, how bad is bad and how good is the A rating?
How bad is bad and how good is A? So I would say that the Fs are, this is not, we didn't at all compare it to service standards or anything like that, but I say that the F is just beyond unacceptable. I mean, literally, these were places where we felt like we just had to fix them. Now, that's only in potentially the peak hours, so that's not necessarily all day, that's maybe only in one direction at one time. I would say in the F you have, there's a combined, hours of delay, because it's also multiplied out by the number of people. And the reliability was based on standard deviation, so there was wild change in standard deviation from stop to stop, so there was a wild amount of deviation between the travel times between in the segments. So I'm not giving you a very good sense of how good or bad it is, but I guess I would say, like, as generally these scales go, I'm not super incredibly worried about the A to C, but the D through F are things that make me more concerned. But I think the key thing as well is when you have a corridor that is running reasonably well, and you have one spot of this big problem, you want to fix that one spot, and the whole corridor should then flow a lot more smoothly, more reliably, and maybe some of these other areas get better just as a result of the whole corridor functioning better.
By the way, I should make a mention that one of our members who's here tonight is Rob Guptill, MBTA from Service Planning.
Yes, we have met.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I wasn't
No,
sure
it's good. Thank
great.
you for making sure I know. I do recognize a few faces in the room, but this project we worked with the T on. We're also working with the T on this grant as well. Okay. We've been working with some of our service planning liaisons, which for us has been more like Phil Grove, and then Andy Reed, because I'm looking at Andy Rieger, Andy Smith.
You don't work for us yet.
Yeah, I didn't know I was at all those meetings. What are you talking about? So and Andy Smith as well. So we are definitely working with the T closely in this. And a big piece of this that you're going to see as well will be also talking about driver education as well. So we want to work with them closely on that. So the pilot. So for this pilot, we applied to the Bar Foundation quite a few months ago. It always takes a long time to get through agreements and everything that everyone needs to sign off and everything. The T and MassDOT are partners that are signed off in this agreement on this. It's absolutely dependent that we're working together for the success of this project. It also depends on us working closely with DCR because they are planning on improvements to the Fresh Pond Parkway intersection that will favor the Mount Auburn flow, and so it will improve traffic for everyone, and we want to do it exactly at the same time as they improve flow for everyone, take that space for buses so that the private vehicular travel flow stays. It might improve a little bit from what it is today, but it won't get dramatically worse, it won't get dramatically better, but obviously the bus situation will get much, much, much better. So we are looking at this part of the corridor that I mentioned, kind of between where 71 and 73 come together up to Fresh Pond Parkway. And we're looking at not just bus-only lanes, but also bike lanes where possible. In Cambridge in particular, this is such a critical piece of our work, is that we want it to be safe for everyone. And as a person who bicycles probably, maybe 75% of the time, I'm absolutely dependent on the T working well for me to be able to bicycle that 75% of the time, so I have something else to do the other 25% of the time. And we will be using temporary materials. It's a pilot, but this is something that's really easy to misconstrue as sort of like a 1 month thing that goes away. That's not what we're doing. We want to use paint instead of thermo, so more temporary than thermo. But it will be red paint, potentially green paint for some of the bicycle conflicts. And we want to leave it in place while we evaluate it and hopefully work towards a longer term permanent installation. Whether that involves some additional construction, whether that involves using thermo later, whatever that is.
Yeah. For people who don't know, could you explain what thermo is?
Sure. This is not really my arena, but the basic idea being that paint will fade in a year. Thermo is installed and sort of like, I'm not technically involved in this, but mounted into the roadway practically. So it really lasts a much longer time. So it's a much more permanent installation. So is that good enough?
Yeah. It's basically like it's like a plasticized coating.
Yeah. And it literally melted onto like
exactly. It becomes part of the asphalt topping.
But they're both just like surface. There's not like a barrier.
Right.
Yes, this is nothing. It's possible that we could use some flex posts or something at like entry points to sort of emphasize, but there won't be any physical, constructed barrier. In fact, this project will involve little to no construction whatsoever. It will involve replacement of signal heads and installation of transit signal priority. Should I explain what that is?
We have a lot of new members this month, but a lot of members started in January.
Great.
So people may not know.
Okay, so very high level, I'm happy to talk about it more if you want. I didn't bring the visual I have for it, which is helpful, but we can basically, so we in Cambridge don't have central control of our signal technology, so it takes a little more work for us to figure out, how to do this, but we can put equipment on our signals, and the T has equipment on their buses, and there's a level of communication that can occur that will, the buses can basically request as they approach an intersection, hey, I'd love some extra green time, or I'd love the green to turn early for me, and the signal can respond and do one of those things. So either as it's approaching, maybe it was about to turn red, but instead it'll say green another 5 seconds or 10 seconds or something to allow the bus to get through. Or maybe it approaches while the light's already red, but it might say, you know what, I can end the other phase early and give you the green earlier than you would have gotten it otherwise.
Who's going to pay for the stuff on the buses?
The stuff on the buses is a T thing.
So
We're not
they
paying
have
for
to
that.
pay for that.
And they should already all be equipped. They already all should have CAD APL systems on them, which are the systems that they need to do this kind of communication.
Right.
So we're working with the T to make sure that the T will have their side covered. We've already implemented a pilot on Mass Ave where their number 1 buses are communicating.
Really?
Yes, and they do it in Boston as well. So
Who knew?
yeah, we have a different technical approach than Boston does because again, our signals aren't centrally controlled. But we've already worked out a pilot with them, so we know how we can carry it out with what we have. But it will take us upgrading some of the signals. I've heard that the signal at Aberdeen is basically like the oldest signal in the city. So we will have to do work to replace that signal equipment, which is not as simple as one would like it to be because of the catenary, well, the existence of the catenary wires. That makes everything a little more difficult. So that's the only level of sort of more construction-y, other than the painting. That's probably the only.
You're not doing Jersey barriers anywhere.
No, we won't do Jersey barriers. Yeah, we would do flex posts if anything, and flex posts are new for us as well. We've been using them in some of our separated bike lane implementations, and so we've already gotten some experience now with the type that we like to use and how we can maintain around them. So we have some experience now this winter with those. I mentioned already the coordination needed with DCR, and then I'm about to show. I'll show you a series of yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a question about the signal communication. Would it be possible, because sometimes our bus stops are at intersections, so it would make more sense for lights to be red when a bus is going to stop there anyway, so it saves time. Is that part of that?
That is always a part of anytime we do signal priority implementation, you look at a number of parameters,
okay.
And it's typically far less ideal to implement it where you have a near side stop, so when the bus stops before the intersection. You can do things like you can move stops, you can try to change the parameters to still account for it, but dwell times can be so variable. So in this case, we have one stop in particular that I would love to have a discussion with the public about, which is the bus, particularly the bus stop going outbound in Aberdeen. I'll show you when we get to the maps. Mm-hmm. It's where there's a merge with vehicles. It's just a horrible place for everyone of any kind, like pedestrians, drivers, cyclists, transit users, everyone. And in the long term, we'd like to reconstruct that intersection and tee it off. But between that and there's a stop right there at Aberdeen, and there's the signal, and we'd like to do signal priority, that would be a great one to try to temporarily remove or temporarily move. But moving bus stops, as you guys also might know, is a lot harder than it sounds like from a public process perspective. So I would love to try to make that part of this, but if that's going to be a deal breaker for people, then to be honest, I'd rather see the lanes go in and not have the priority work optimally at that intersection. So, good question.
What's that intersection? I mean, I used to take the 71. I just can't remember.
Yeah, I'll show you if you'll skip ahead. So this is it. So does this make sense? So Star Market's over here, if you know that. Mount Auburn Cemetery, the main entrance is here. Aberdeen is where the 75. 72 or 75?
72.
Thank you, 72. This is where the 72 does its terminus and layover here to go back into Harvard Square.
Right.
So does this look familiar to people? There's a gas station, but there's 2 gas stations, right? And then there's that gravestone store right here. It always to me stands out, but I don't know if other people feel the same way. So these are again literally the signals probably in the city. They need work, and the T is currently doing work now because they're having trouble re-energizing the wires after the Huron Ave reconstruction. So the 72s are still not back on the catenary buses, so there's a whole lot of fun stuff going on here right now. But what happens is that, and this is also a very popular bike route to stay off of Mount Auburn Street here. So between bikes trying to cut over and drivers trying to get around all of the traffic that typically is backed up to around here in the morning, there's a lot of movement on Brattle Street. And when people come outbound, this is treated as almost as though like Brattle has the priority and people just kind of plow into it. It has a lot to do with the geometry and visibility and things like that, and because it's kind of an angle that other vehicles are coming in at. And the buses are in this lane trying to get over to this stop, and a lot of people from Brattle are trying to get over to the left lane to go through to get out from behind the buses, and they're turning traffic into Aberdeen and to Mount Auburn. So it is, I mean Star Market. So it is a horrible place. That's my professional opinion. It's horrible. So that's the stop that I would love to not make. The buses already have to deal with all this. It'd be great not to have to deal with this plus stop here. But as a person who lives in Aberdeen, you know, I'm very aware of how useful this stop is for some people, especially if you have any mobility challenges. Now, I was the type of transit nerd who, when I used to ride the bus home, I would never push the button for Aberdeen, and if somebody else pushed it, I would get off there, but otherwise I'd always go just a little further down to Star Market and get off and walk back, just to not hold up the bus, but most people don't think that way.
Would it be as simple as making that stop on the far side?
So if you make it on the far side, it's really close. I think it's like 200 feet or something to this next one, to the Star Market one, and the Star Market one is the big one, because, you know, and also one we wouldn't want to move further away if people are carrying things.
Right.
Is
So,
there a light there?
in the long term, there's definitely a light here.
Oh, yeah,
You can't, they're all little, they're not the types of lights, they're not the overhead lights, they're just these little tiny, and they all need to be upgraded. And the other thing I was going to say is that, interestingly, there's also a stop, this isn't quite right, there's also a stop right about over here that once upon a time we tried to eliminate through a public process, and it didn't go well. So we still have the one there, the one here, and the one at Star. And again, my personal opinion in the long term, but this has to go through public process and everything, so I don't know who's watching on YouTube, but in the long run, what we would love to do, and this is part of the DCR public process, so it's not like I'm just making this up, you tee off Brattle Street, and you make this into a new kind of usable space. You can maybe protected bike facilities cutting across here, but no vehicles. And then you take this stop and perhaps move it to a new, better location here, and maybe you try again to get rid of that one, I'm not sure. I don't even want to go there, but like, you know, I think it would be better served away from the intersection of it. So, yeah, so there's only certain things we can do in the pilot, but we're thinking about the long term as we think about the short term, of course.
Are you bringing the catenary buses back? You're trying pretty hard to do that.
On the 72?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the city and the residents and everyone desperately want it back. Yeah. The T, it seems purely to be they were off for so long, issues happened, they cannot re-energize the wires. We talked to the power folks a number of times, they're working pretty hard at it. Destroying the landscaping on Aberdeen and the median, trying to get down there and figure out what the problems are. The T would love, to be fair, to get the catenary buses back on, because while they don't have them, they're using other vehicle stock that they don't want to use for this purpose. So everybody wants those back on.
Good. Some people on your own, they definitely.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Is it literally the case that it's going to be 100% of the same electrified routes that were before that 72 shutdown?
Yes.
Like every single inch of electrified service with nothing being taken out at all? Just because I'm as much of a fan of the trackless trolleys as
well, so the routing is expected to be the same as it was before. Right. There are proposals out there to improve routing for like the 72, 75, 74, and 78. I have it right. And to do sort of like slightly different routings, and someone at the Transit Committee in Cambridge has had a really nice proposal for that. He's been talking about it, but that requires not using the catenaries out there. So that's really problematic. One of the things that we would love to see the results of is the T's been talking about doing an electric battery bus pilot, and they're doing a feasibility analysis for the pilot now. We will continue to advocate that we'd love to see a pilot on the catenary, where the catenary buses are. Part of the reason for that is not only can they not get the Huron Avalons back going on, they're supposed to be doing bus tunnel work in Harvard this summer. We will be doing our portion of so Belmont Street reconstruction of Belmont happened, so the catenaries were off for a little while for that. We are going to be doing our own little segment, which is it's further than what you can see on here, but we have a Cambridge section of Belmont Street that we're going to be doing in about, 3 years, I think. And in about 4 years, Watertown's going to be doing all of Mount Auburn Street. And so over the next 5 years, the chances of the catenary buses being on consistently is a little iffy. So we think this would be a great place to pilot one. Yes?
I'll tell you, one of the issues that I have with the catenary, I mean, I understand the appeal, but the problem is just that you can't move a bus that's less crowded in front, and so it's like, a lot of times if I see a crowded bus, I see a bus on my app, I know one's coming later soon, but soon afterwards, I'll get on that one because I'm pretty much guaranteed I'm going to get to where I'm going before the bus is crowded. And you don't have that option on the catenary. And that's my concern about this pilot, is that it may not show as good results for the throughput because of that limitation if you're running the catenary. And, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. I think it constrains us. I think I think the constraint will be the same, roughly speaking, before, during, and after the pilot, is my feeling. And in fact, maybe there's a better chance of it working better in this portion, because part of what it doesn't really happen in this section. Part of what happens out of Belmont, for example, is that a truck will need to unload at one of the businesses, and the parking spaces will be taken up, and so it'll just stop in the right-hand lane of traffic. And then the bus needs to go around it, and there's only a certain amount of give, and then they drop the wires, and then you have the truck stopped in one lane, the bus completely out of power in the next lane, and then like it's, you know, the bus can't get back on the catenaries. But in this section, I would say because they're going to be staying in the same lane, and ideally we'll be getting less bunching in general, just because it'll be flowing more smoothly. Hopefully, that's not like the deal breaker in terms of it showing the level of benefit we want it to. But it's a good point to keep an eye on that buses can't pass.
And also, I mean, I thought about this, and here's the argument against it. Actually, it's just that even like in the case of Everett, essentially what you did was you did confine the buses to a lane. I mean, so even when they had, let's say, a degree of freedom to move around, by doing the bus priority, you actually essentially made them like catenary. So now the key is to do your throughput such that you don't get the excessive crowding that slows it down.
Absolutely. So, it's a good point with when people like the idea of barriers and things so that drivers cannot get into the bus lane. But one of the other, it's the same thing with protected bike lanes too. One of the other challenges to it is that then the buses can't get out of the lane if they have to go around a broken down bus or something else. So in this case, the good thing is that there's not a barrier. So let's just say that a trolley bus breaks down in the bus lane, as long as they can, I mean, and it's rough. If they can squeeze into the next lane of traffic without dropping the wires, they can still get around them, but it's very risky, and I've seen them drop all the time. So these are, I mean, again, in the long run, we would love to see an electric alternative, but we certainly don't want to get rid of the electric technology we have in the near term.
Have you thought of induction alternative pilot?
Induction, now again, this is not my area of expertise, but is that where the sort of the wireless the charging with the sort of the
Well, it's embedded in the street.
Oh, in the street, yeah.
So you can't see it, and it's only on when there's a signal from the vehicle that needs it.
Yeah.
And Nam Su is one of the world's experts at that. He was head of mechanical engineering at MIT for most of his career.
Yeah.
And he has international patents on it. Built 3 systems in Korea when he was there as head of KAIS.
So I think as the T explores their willingness and ability to pilot the vehicles, it'd be good for us to have a conversation in partnership with them. I mean, no matter what, whether they're putting charging infrastructure in somewhere, they will probably need space from the cities to help do that. And if we do something like in the road, induction-wise, obviously they need to be working with the cities for that. I'm not sure we haven't talked about it much as a city, and we haven't really been a driver for that kind of technology. We were just a driver for wanting to pilot electric vehicle technology.
The advantage is you can drop half the weight of the vehicles. You don't need 90% of the battery.
Okay. So and I imagine they work better when you have a dedicated lane for the buses versus when
I don't know that it matters so much, but if you were wanting throughput for BRT, then you would probably want a dedicated lane.
Yeah.
But it's much more energy efficient in the long run, and there's not really parts touching each other, so you're not going to crop the wires.
Definitely. I mean, I think we'd love to get away from the wire dropping.
Yeah. So he's emeritus at this point, but he's pretty easy to look up.
Okay. Maybe I'll get in contact with yours. I mean, again, I'm not. I think it would be great if we can always push the T for this stuff, but at the end, this kind of stuff ends up being which technology they use ends up being the T's can. But I hope they're thinking about it in their feasibility study about the different types of.
And that there's starting to be more induction light rail systems as well.
Okay. All right. That's nice. I haven't thought about that much. So that's good.
Carl.
Would it be a question kind of along those lines? Are there opportunities to add batteries to the current buses or buses like them that would give them the chance to go like a tenth of a mile off the catenary?
That's a really good point. I'll bug the T folks about that. I would like to think that they would have already considered that option just because it affects their operations so hugely when one of them comes off the wires and there's no way to get back on. But I don't know the answer to that question if they've considered it or if there's some constraint that's either surmountable or not. Yeah.
As opposed to having a huge battery to take a hold.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah. We just Ted Bill Wolfgang, the Director of Design and Engineering for Vehicles for the MBTA at the committee meeting 2 weeks ago, so I'll email him that question.
That's great, yeah, you should, yeah. Yeah, I am not equipped to answer that question, but I think it's a good one. And I always like hearing questions that I'm not always equipped to answer myself, because then I can also ask the T those questions and work with them. And we liaise and coordinate with the T in Cambridge quite a lot. So I like to hear these things.
Can I ask a couple of bike questions? But I can hold if you're in the middle.
Would you want me to run through what the pilot will look like, and then we'll just talk more? I mean, either way. So I just wanted to flip through. All this is really is obviously satellite images of the area, and just trying to show you where we're talking about putting in bus lanes and bike lanes. You don't fit, the lines need to be, rearranged a little bit, so this is not precise. But just roughly speaking, the key thing is that we see the most congestion in the morning inbound. We're not talking about a AM only bus lane here, because it's harder to enforce, a temporal restriction. And in the off-peak, it's not a problem for anyone really to get through it, so why do people need to go back to having 2 lanes to get through it? So this would be an all-day red-painted bus lane restricted to other vehicles, except for it'll also serve Mount Auburn hospital shuttles that go to and from the outer parking lots. It would also serve, there's Athena Health shuttles that use this, and then of course emergency vehicles and other vehicles trying to get through can use it. So it's a benefit for more than just the MBTA buses. I want to make sure that's very clear.
How about school buses?
Let's see. So I know there are Bentley buses on this route. I don't know if there are school buses. It's a really good question. Typically, it's a good question. We haven't even, I don't think I've seen any on this route. That doesn't mean they're not there. There is BB&N, around the corner, but I don't know if I feel like, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. Hopefully we'll work through that some in our stakeholder process over the next couple of months and have conversations with other buses and shuttle providers. So the idea being, again, this is Watertown, so we are working closely with Watertown. They are co-applicants for the grant. Have some level of bus queue jump, both here and here on Belmont Street leading into the intersection, for a couple of different reasons. I mean, right now there's not a lot of queuing and congestion at either of these intersections, but with the signal timing changes that are going to happen on the whole corridor, vehicles will be moving through it, through the whole area faster, and by that I don't mean higher speeds, I just mean in terms of congestion-wise, they'll be getting through it more consistently at a reasonable speed. But the queuing might back up a little further because they'll only be in one lane. So we want to make sure, one, buses can get around if there's some cars here, but also because there's a single receiving lane for regular traffic and a single receiving lane for the buses, we want to set everyone up for the intersection to be able to flow into that configuration. So this is the star market, just so you know, up here. Nothing's happening to this sort of weird parking cutout in the near term, and through much of this section we can fit in a northbound bike lane. We'll have a lot of discussion with cycling advocates and the bike committee as well. It's tricky. We can't fit in a bike lane on both sides plus the bus lane unless you're squeezing it to a point where we think it's incredibly uncomfortable for cyclists to be next to a bus. Right now, what a lot of us do, and I say us, when I bike by myself, I do one thing. When I bike with my child, my 3-year-old, I do something else. I live over here, by the way, so yeah. So a lot of us will use the sidewalk on the inbound direction if we're going up to Brattle Street, and so you can kind of continue to do that. But if you want to be in the lane, you would likely be sharing where the bus is going through here, which is why T coordination education is a huge component of this, because as soon as cyclists feel threatened in that bus lane, we're going to have a really hard time continuing to promote that it's a good thing. So, but at least we could do a lane in the north side to help sort of organize traffic a little more and give cyclists more space. And then just moving through it, again, red is bus, green is bike. So what happens here is that we're going to drop the bus lane for a section. So we'll get the buses through probably more like just a queue jump, so the signal will turn green for buses a few seconds early to allow them to get in front of the congestion, because vehicles going straight are going to want to get over here because this becomes a left turn lane. We have a huge number of people turning left, relatively speaking, large number of people turning left onto Aberdeen, so the next section here. This is already a left turn only lane, and it would stay a left turn only lane. So you'd still allow these drivers to be able to queue up and turn left there. So that's a mixed single lane of traffic. And then we go through this terrible area, but at least we can maintain bicycle facilities from about where Brattle Street comes in, and this is often where cyclists will come up and continue on Brattle Street when they're going in that direction, and this direction they can. And the other thing we want to do is really highlight this as being green in a conflict area, and also put in shark's teeth yield arrows and things that indicate to the drivers that they need to slow down before they even get to this intersection. Yield to cyclists, yield to traffic, and hopefully that'll help improve the flow a little bit as well. And then after this is a new sort of left turn only lane, because again, a lot of vehicles are trying to get up to Brattle Street instead of continuing on. And then the vehicles going through will continue up into this lane, and then the bus lane will pick up again. And that's where you get, I think, the really huge time savings is in this next section, because again, morning when you're riding the bus, it's almost always the traffic is queued up to here. Now again, with the DCR signal changes up here, they go on both of these signals. This throughput is going to improve, and traffic on Freshman Parkway might get a little bit worse as a result. But since the throughput will improve, so moving this from 2 lanes to 1 lane shouldn't be a huge impact on drivers from a travel time perspective, and it'll still be a huge benefit to the buses. So that's how we're trying to balance this. It's I don't think we could do this in this configuration if the signal changes weren't also happening, because all of a sudden you'd have vehicles queued back to Watertown Square, and we'd hear from multiple, and Waverly Square, and you'd hear from all these different municipalities, including our own, how terrible it all is. So that is, I don't have to talk about this in any detail. Just want to remind you guys, I was talking about a 6-month timeline for this. So we're doing a bunch of sort of internal kickoffs and like capacity building and working out who we're going to be coordinating with. We'll start a few kind of outreach to businesses. Watertown is having a public meeting in this time frame associated with their project. And this is where we'll really start to mobilize and do, we hope, very broad-reaching public campaigns. So things like ads on buses, flyers on the side of the street, electronic versions, surveys, wiki maps, sort of have people at the bus stops talking to the bus riders, that you can put things on the buses. So really trying to generate a lot of excitement. It's a really big component of the grant, and then implement in June. So I don't know if I took too much time going through all the details, but I'm certainly happy to talk as long as you guys want to continue to chat about this and ask questions.
Sure. What do you see as the biggest risks to the project?
I really think, so one is if DCR and the city, if we can somehow get to the point where we do this at the same time. Because I think if either traffic flow dramatically improves and then we take it away, for the bus lane, that could look really bad for people. And so, or we do it too early and the whole sort of area blows up and people think it's an epic failure. So that's one issue, is coordination with DCR, a key component. Another challenge is going to be that we, and most of these are public process political things and not technical feasibility. Technically, this is feasible. Another aspect is kind of making sure that we are all on board with this is an improvement for everyone, and even it's not an ideal for everyone. It's not separated bike lanes. We're not doing that kind of construction here. You might do even more. There might be some challenges in the outbound directions for buses that we're not able to really improve yet. So it's overall an improvement for everyone, but if anyone focuses on a specific thing, well, this isn't good enough, and we have to start to tip the balance in one direction or another, it could make the project a lot less successful. So that's a challenge to work through with people. I think another thing is really that we just do not have the level of support and engagement with the transit community as we do. I mean, it doesn't even think of itself as a community. What do you mean the transit community? That's the thing. There's not really a transit community. I really mean transit riders, bus riders, people who are on this corridor in transit. The way we do with, say, for example, the cycling community. We have a very strong bike safety group, this sort of thing. And this isn't the type of project that's going to blow their mind. It's adding a bike lane, and it's not a separated bike facility. So
what are you going to do about it?
So I mentioned just a second ago, we want to have a really broad-reaching public campaign.
And how is that going to happen?
So through our coordination with Bar Foundation, and they have a communications team called Denterline. It's not a very sexy name, but they do a lot of graphics and brochures and communication pieces. They'll help us with getting that out more broadly. We have our own communications coordinator who manages all of our social media and press releases and things. And then we want to work with groups, we hope, with Livable Streets, for example, who helps to mobilize street teams so that people get on the ground. We have a huge number of high school students that work with the city over the summertime that are also great on-the-ground presence. They've been helping with our citywide planning the last couple of summers. are getting this, one of the ways for them to learn how to sort of communicate with the public, and then also the close coordination with the T, put things on the buses.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, he hasn't done this in a long time, but in the old days, maybe 6, 7 years ago, whenever there was a public meeting, you'd be on the bus and there'd be a paper there you could read, and I have not seen anything in years.
I just saw one for Chelsea.
Good.
It was clearly a bus that was interlined, so it served a route, you know,
Right,
there
right,
at some point, and it was serving a route in Cambridge, so it wasn't a Chelsea audience on the bus at the time I was on it, but I did see one, but I agree with you. I think it should be done. It hasn't been done much, and it could be done a lot more.
And I don't know why it hasn't been done in a long time.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I can't tell you that one. I don't know if you want to facilitate people or not, or do you want me to just? I mean,
by all means. Sorry, I'm just
okay.
looking at.
You had your hand first.
Yeah.
So what are the environmental and economic impacts? You guys have it listed somewhere?
So we don't. So the environmental impact should be essentially neutral, except for mode shift.
I don't mean necessarily that it would be a negative.
Yeah.
Just as far as getting people interested.
Yeah. So we don't have a methodology right now for this pilot, just sort of to measure those. We're going to be talking about the evaluation metrics over the next couple of months, and I think that so mode shift would be one way we would get at environmental impacts. We're not removing any trees, we're not, you know, doing anything like that. So we would think about, do we see any mode shift? But that's pretty hard to measure with a short-term pilot. In terms of the economic impacts, we're very interested in talking to the businesses and surveying people who use the businesses and trying to figure out before and after, is there an impact on the customer base, does the business owner perceive anything? So I think we will try to get at that in our evaluation, but this is not sort of the full-scale kind of environmental and economic impact study that we might do with a sort of major reconstruction project. So if you have any thoughts or tips about how to get at those questions and answer them to get people excited about them, I would absolutely welcome them. I'm still thinking about it. And I'll share my cards with people, by the way, as well, before I leave, if anybody wants to.
So two things, these are probably more T related. One, when you're engaging the public about the project, I think it might be good to do some education as to how to use the T more efficiently. So for instance, if the bus is crowded, you wait for the next one, you'll find that the whole system works faster. That can be applied not only to buses, but also to trains. It's more like, well, think of the system as a whole. And if you have the luxury, to wait, rather than crowding that train and making it go slower, or a bus, if you wait, then the whole thing works faster. Just try to plant that seed out there. And the other is that there is an elasticity associated with unreliability. So that drives demand down, and so as the system gets more reliable, you should probably see demand come up.
Oh, hopefully. Yeah.
But if demand comes up though, but you don't have the buses there to meet the demand, then you get crowding, which has elasticity associated with it, and so to the extent that the T can be in a position to maybe provide more buses, should they see the demand go up, it can help make the project more successful.
So we do hear the MassDOT, the second point, we do hear MassDOT right now say things like, oh, we want to work with municipalities that do this kind of thing. And we're hoping that partly means we do this kind of thing, we reduce cycle times. Not only do the existing number of buses on the route, maybe are they able to run a little bit more frequently, just with that number, maybe they can also start thinking about adding buses to the corridor because they're already packed, even with the level of unreliability that they have now. Right. In the morning peak, but also in the outbound PM peak, they're packed. So totally agree, and we will continue to push the T to hopefully we can, work together on that.
Yeah.
The first question about sort of the general education, I think that's a really interesting point, and sort of like how do we want to do this blitz that we're talking about doing, both leading up to the pilot and the first month of the pilot, and sort of how broad do we go, and can we work with the T to do other things that get people, help people understand the system better and how it works so they can make those kinds of improvements, because I think the biggest challenge with this stuff is people don't understand what happens when they hold up the bus an extra 5 seconds because they're trying to squeeze on, when it's too crowded or things like that. So I think that's a good point, and I don't know that the T has any plans to do that kind of outreach, but it might be interesting to talk with them. Can they pilot something like that as part of this?
We've been tossing around the idea of a guide to how to best utilize the T for a while, something that
if you guys develop that, I would love to pass it out as part of this effort. If you want to use this as a motivating...
I hear that.
Yeah, how come they don't take out like PSAs or so to speak?
Take off your backpack, stand on the right.
Yeah.
All these things, yep.
Basic common sense for those of us who have transit.
To put ads on YouTube or something like, you know, that, especially when you can tell where someone's watching something from, you know, that you can.
I'm glad we planted the seed, yeah, for the new members. If you have ideas of things that should be communicated about how to optimize the use of the T, that's the kind of thing we want to bring up in the operations and the communications subcommittee.
Do you guys do minutes of these meetings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm listening and I'm absorbing, but it would also be nice to be able to go back to it and kind of look at that.
It'll be on YouTube, the recording will be on YouTube for 3 months.
Great.
And yeah, once we can get a transcribed from Brian, thank you in advance.
Yeah, I just want to make sure these are all, I mean, again, I'm listening and observing, I'd love to see them recorded, some of these videos.
We've got some more questions.
Yeah.
So, you know, you talked about how there isn't, you know, an equivalent transit rider advocacy movement as there is for the cyclists, and you know, I think I know that, and I'm new to this, but why isn't there? And like, how could I care a lot about, you know, transit, and I wish there was. Is it because cyclists, like, you know, have more of the safety issue, like literally just to their body, and you know, because I think overall, like, if transit riders, you know, had a joint advocacy movement, then like overall cyclists would be happier too, probably.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any recommendations, anyone, for how to like organize.
Yeah, I mean, it's just speculation on my part at this point too. I mean, I think I agree with you about, you know, I guess someone who's been a long-term cyclist who's also been involved in a lot of cycling advocacy, there's this difference, this visceral feeling of vulnerability and safety that does kind of factor into how passionate you feel about it. But there's also this culture around cycling, like people love their bikes, they have their, maybe it's because they have more ownership over it, like they have their own bike and they, you know, have their own community, they have total control over their commute on their bikes. I mean, all of these things might contribute to a different kind of culture versus, you know, mass transit is really, I think still viewed by some people as just a form of transportation. And it's a really amazing, great form of transportation. People don't, you know, only a small subset of us get excited about it, I think. And people also feel like a lot of it is outside of their control.
Right.
And so that doesn't help either. So, I mean, I know that, you know, the city generating support, the way we look at it is we want to do as much as we can to try to make compelling cases like the, you know, like the space and usage kind of argument. Again, how do we make this more graphically compelling and more exciting to people? We have publications that we put together. One is called Street Code, and it's all about how everyone on the roadway can behave better and work better together. It's very graphical, and people really love it, and it's really compelling to them. It doesn't generate the like transit, you know, go transit thing, but I think that those types of communication tactics are important. And then you can always interact with other advocacy groups like Transit Matters and or Livable Streets that are trying to figure out how to, literally, Livable Streets are like a Make Transit Sexy campaign. And I don't know if you've seen on YouTube I think the Montreal ads that are hilarious. It's basically like these spoof ads where people are getting on the bus like, this is the best thing ever! And it's really dramatic and silly, and it's like make buses sexy again. So I don't know how effective any of these things are, but I think whatever appeals to people, you know, like that got a lot of play on social media just because it was such a dramatic, silly ad campaign, but it got a lot of play. But I think the more you make the service appealing, the more people actually feel more ownership and kind of affection for it. Right now, it's like buses seem like they're the bottom of the barrel for people. It's like, well, I don't, you know, it's too expensive to park, and I don't want to bike because I don't like getting like wet in the rain, so I guess I'll ride a bus. That's what it feels like. So it's about transforming that into being a pleasant experience. That's a step up, and I think things like these priority facilities really contribute to it as well. But that's most important too.
So I have a couple of questions. One maybe outside of your bailiwick, so I'll start with that one.
Okay.
The second one I think is in it. You know, with the Green Line, they have committed to complete the community path.
Yeah.
And
I'm on that working group, by the way. I'm one of the representatives of the city on that working group.
Oh, sorry, you're there this morning.
I was.
Okay, sorry I missed it, but
yeah.
I figured other people were covering it.
Yeah.
It seems pretty important to preserve, and maybe this came up this morning because I asked some of the people to bring it up, to preserve the ability to connect Northern Strand and Grand Junction into that nexus with the community path now that it's going to be completed, especially.
Yes.
Are you working on that, or somebody
Yes.
is working on that?
Well, many people are, I'd say. My specific role, I'm on the working group for Green Line Extension. I'm also the main project manager moving forward the design and construction of the Grand Junction path.
Okay.
So it is clearly a nexus of things that I'm involved in. We have, I think, what'll be nice is our already friends of the community, friends of the path, and then also the Grand Junction path friends might be starting back up again, and that will be really helpful.
Yeah.
This is really important because it's a Somerville Cambridge coordination. I mean, it's like right on the line. So it's both the projects themselves plus the municipal coordination, and we are now organizing more conversations in the city of Cambridge between various municipal and other agency stakeholders, as well as advocacy groups. So I'm this main staff coordinating those meetings, and us getting together and talking about it, I think, is the most effective way for us to figure out how to universally find pressure points that we can use, either to MassDOT or to in a development project or whatever it is.
Okay.
So that's been our approach.
So just for folks who may not know, from Minuteman to the Dudley White Pass in Boston is a 50-mile regional network. It's by far the biggest biking network in New England, I think, in an urban area. And so it has enormous potential for carrying serious numbers of people. The other question I wanted to ask is about exposures. If you guys are thinking about bicyclist exposures, because I was told from somebody who's one of the 3 top people in the state that it was the exposures that pushed them over on doing the path.
Yeah.
That's part of the Green Line. And people, especially bike and ped advocates, don't have very good awareness of the actual exposures and the long-term health effects of those exposures.
Yeah.
So are you guys thinking about that in Cambridge?
So I certainly hear you talk about exposures at the MPO, at the Green Line Extension meetings, and so you're one of the people that keeps it really in the conversation, obviously.
Beat a dead horse in the wrong
No. And so I'm just letting you know that I certainly know what you're talking about from you primarily, but I do know that a portion of this separated bike lane movement, of which Cambridge has been pretty strong in, is just getting a little bit more distance from exposure to the particulates and other damaging things. Now, are we doing any particular things as a city to study those health effects and outcomes? I would say no, but I think that there's, Kara Seidemann is really the one to ask, who's been at the city a very long time working on these bike facilities. Okay. But I think that partnering with people doing that kind of research would absolutely be something within the interest of the city.
Yeah, and there's a fair amount of qualified academics in this area, not the same as the bike advocates, but just for people to know, the exercise is good for you no matter where you live, whether you live in a really polluted part of the city or not. But the air pollution is really bad for you, even if you get tons of exercise. So the two have an independent effect and a very large effect. So I think in the longer term, and people just naturally focus on acute things like an accident as opposed to long-term chronic health, which I think is about a factor of 100 more important with regard to cyclists and peds than the acute, but we're wired to think acute. So
I think one of the benefits of this pilot in that arena is that if you have people who are staying on road in the bus lanes with the electric buses, they're ideally getting a little bit more. And again, this is not the environment. This is not the sort of air pollution in a general sense, but from a proximity to vehicles that are emitting, they're getting a little bit more space.
Yeah, it will help a little
nice,
bit, but really, if people have an alternate rush hour path, that would be way.
The Watertown Cambridge Greenway starts construction next construction season, which is great. And we're working on the Grand Junction path, but also working on transit feasibility on the Grand Junction alignment. We are always working to create alternatives to roadway
and who's working on the transit feasibility now? Grand Junction, you? Okay.
Apparently doing everything in the city.
Okay, well, no, you're just working on the good stuff, so I might contact you about that.
Please do. We are still working on how to scope it and piece it into the, we're still working on a lot of details, so I'm happy to talk about them with you. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Carl, before you go, Carl, just quick, on Watertown, Cambridge Greenway?
Yeah, so Do you know the, so this is the very close, this is the very close view,
Is
but,
it the old railroad line?
yes, it's the old railroad line.
Okay.
Actually, let me go up to this one, I think. So you can kind of see it, right? It, you know, kind of through here, and then it continues to the portion of the path that exists in Watertown down here to carry you through Arsenal Street. So that gap is being filled in with the work cooperation between Watertown, Cambridge, DCR, and others. I did not work on that one, so yeah, that's a good fact.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Carl.
Does this work relate to the Mass Ave transit signal priority work in any way other than that being improving ground for the TSP?
That was for the pilot bus, exactly. So, and now that that pilot is in place, we can both use it here, but we can also use the participatory budgeting money we have to implement it more broadly on Mass Ave. But right now, the reason why we haven't gone fully into that yet is that right now traffic and parking is exploring the idea of starting to centrally control some of our signals. And so they're not sure they want to continue with the pilot, which is not centrally controlled, versus if they want to try a new version of doing it where it is centrally controlled. But in this section, no matter what, it would be a long time before any of these signals would be centrally controlled, so it's clear, the path forward is clear here than on Mass Ave.
How, I'm interested in the Route 1 bus. Has there been an improvement in on-time performance or anything?
So the fun thing with TSP is that once you do it kind of broadly on a corridor, it can have significant impacts on travel time and reliability. When you do one single intersection, you're not likely, you need to gather a lot of data from a statistical perspective. So it hasn't even been in place long enough to get that much data. But what we have looked at is how many requests are coming through and how many are being granted. And from the perspective of the buses requesting green light earlier or extending it and the amount of times it's granted, it's looking like success. It's
I
working.
don't understand. I would think a week would be plenty.
No, not for statistically relevant. You're talking about seconds from a
Seconds, it's only an improvement in seconds. Why do it at all?
Because when you do it on a corridor level, you start to save minutes. You multiply it out by the number of people, you save more. But you want to get a lot of data points when you're looking at that small of at one intersection, that small.
I'm going to say something now. The perfect is the enemy of the good.
Totally, that's why we're doing it. But we just can't measure the seconds saved yet. That's, yeah, we literally cannot measure the seconds saved right now. There are too many other competing factors. And so it would mean nothing, and we don't have enough data to do it.
Well,
it doesn't show any
something if
savings.
it didn't show, if it showed no improvement at all.
It did. I would be happy to get into a more detailed mathematical conversation about that.
I just know they did,
yeah.
on the 39 bus, what they did was they moved the stops further apart, no improvement. So they blame it on traffic, but still, you did a lot of work and it inconvenienced a lot of people because the stops are way far apart now and you got no improvement.
And that's part of the struggle with the conversation of potentially shutting down a stop or moving the stop slightly in this context, is that I don't want that to be the deal breaker for people saying you're really inconvenienced. A lot of us who live on Aberdeen, is there really much benefit to doing that? Why are you doing it? There needs to be a lot of benefit in this case that we need to show to sort of justify that as part of the pilot, which is why if we get pushback that that's too inconvenient, we probably won't tie this into the pilot.
You're going to get pushback, even if it's one crotchety person.
Yeah, well, that's why I say too much pushback, or
or one pain in them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have kind of a hard stop at 6:30 that I wanted to observe. Is that okay?
No problem.
I will definitely leave some cards on the table because, as may be obvious, I super enjoy talking about these kinds of things. So I have no problem if you guys are interested in, chatting about a specific issue. And we'll be going out to the public for this pretty soon, so feel free, please, to participate from that perspective as well. So
this will turn into a lot of discussion in our subcommittees, that's for sure.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you guys.
Actually, I'll just leave these up in the corner. If somebody wants one, there's about maybe a dozen here.
Yeah,
thank you.
If not, you can find me on the web pretty easily. Look up any of these projects.
I think
we wrapped up.
We wrapped up on capital.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you be willing to give a quick summary of operations, marketing operations from this past month, or somebody else who was there? I mean, I can fill in a little bit.
Exercise of memory. Yeah. So we got Bill Wolfgang and Dave Carney. Bill Wolfgang spent half an hour with us, and Dave Carney spent the whole time with us, and then took the members who were there down to, up to the rail OCC and down to the bus ops control center. In terms of buses, Bill, what did Bill tell us about buses? I'm trying to remember.
In terms of the
Talking about fleet.
The fleet, yeah, and
The oldest models are out.
yeah,
And they seem happy with the new ones.
yeah,
The 360 some.
right, yeah.
It's
spent some time
310
talking about
buses, I believe. 310 buses is the new.
310.
I think so.
Right.
There's a lot of time spent talking about the barriers for the drivers.
Right. Well,
And some
over
issues.
the usage. Your memory's so much better on this.
There were also discussed some issues with getting bus drivers and the lottery system and
Right.
those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And, the Family Medical Leave Act, there were different issues about the bus drivers and retaining them and getting good people was
Right.
discussed.
Yeah. So that was kind of it.
Yeah, well, this-
Someone was really excited about the silver line that had like the wooden jackknife in the snow. And
Right.
it's and he was like super amped that we were gonna get more of those.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
the dual axle
Right.
articulated buses
Yes.
are going to be the majority, I believe, of the 60-foot articulateds, which should eliminate the jackknifing because the current articulated 60-foots only have one axle in the rear.
Someone was really excited about the silver line that had like
That's great.
didn't care for that.
That was you.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Somebody-
Goes to the machine. I'll just make sure. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So currently, the current buses push from the rear, so they tend to push themselves into an angle. The other thing of note that Bill brought up was the delivery schedule of the orange and the red line cars. Is I believe his interpretation was on schedule. Everything is going according to plan. There's been no major setbacks, if any at all. And that I believe also includes the Wellington yard rebuild.
And he was like super amped that we were gonna get more of those.
Yes, the dual axle articulated buses are. Yes, I do know what that is. Sorry, I had the live stream open in this other tab on this laptop. Too many laptops at once. Anyway, the red line test track's coming along, the orange line's coming along, and everything is basically like it's good to go. I'm still looking for more information on the green line because I don't know if there's actually been a public, the Type 9s, the new ones. I don't know if there's actually been a public viewing as such of the mock-up or even of the test cars, which I believe are either on the way or about to be delivered any day. There was a public viewing of the mock-up of the orange line cars right on Government Center Plaza. They're pretty similar to the red line cars, I think that covers it, but one of my big suggestions for a field trip is once it's an appropriate time, we can arrange it to go out to Riverside as a group, subgroup, subcommittee, whatever. It might not be able to be during evening hours, so it might have to be during business hours, whatever the T staff can have to accommodate us, but I would like to see the Type 9 mock-ups or the test cars.
So for our TAC, I suggested a field trip to Springfield.
Yeah, I'd like to do that too, actually.
Yeah.
Once they're really...
Once it's up and running, yeah. Yeah, that's a bit of a commitment. I mean, Springfield's what, a 2-hour drive typically?
Well, if we could do it on a Saturday.
Sure.
And like get...
Carpool.
Yeah, carpool or get some kind of shuttle or something.
Yeah.
Doesn't the T have a special transportation on
If only we had some kind of
That's a
regional
good question. That's a very good question. I think we're doing okay on time. Would anybody like me to pull up these shots from it's relevant to the subcommittee meeting we had 2 weeks ago where we mentioned we got a tour of the Operations Control Center. Did anybody think this is not a good thing to do right now? and I'll just pull this up for the people who didn't make it or wouldn't come to the operations anyway. To put it in context, this is the wall of video is basically 2 stories tall. It makes the bridge of the Starship Enterprise look like a toy. It's a half circle. I wouldn't say a full 180 degrees, but pretty close to it. A wall of monitors with various dispatchers right in front of them. The people who are down on the people who are down at the foot here are the individual line dispatchers, one for red, orange, blue, green, and show you sort of sense of scope. The location where we were is sort of the manager's control center. It's like a bridge deck looking down onto all the maps. So the people actually running the show are down at the lower level, looking at all the track charts and the positions of everything. And we also have closed circuit video as well, showing key places in the stations. On the track maps, green means it's an unoccupied block, there's no train in it. If you see a red block on the map, it means that there's a train at that location. And the red on the maps marches along. And this is manned, I believe it's manned 24/7, but on the overnight, it's pretty much just down to one person who coordinates the power being shut off for different sections as the track crews go through and do their work. There's this interesting ladder kind of a thing for, I don't know if this will come out, but these are the 4 branches of the Green Line. And the color coding is such that it allows the dispatcher to identify at a glance which of the lines are located where on the main section of it. I don't know if I got a good shot of that, but yeah, kind of sort of. Because the B, C, D, E lines are all color-coded here, you see purple, green, yellow, blue. Along the main line, you can see there's blue, there's red, there's yellow. That indicates whether it's a B, C, D, or E train in the central subway. And of course, there's all the video screens. They can pull up, we were told, any camera in the entire MBTA system on any one of these screens at any time, and that goes for even video in the buses. They can pull up a live feed as the bus is on the route of any bus, anytime, on any screen if they want to watch it. We also went down into the bus operations center. Dave Carney showed us this. This is dedicated for buses, and one of the interesting things about the bus op center is the concept of the route ladder, which is up here. Blue, meaning kind of cool, meaning it's running behind. Green is on time, and if it's running ahead of schedule, it's running hot, and it gets the red. So needless to say, you can see all of the blue, meaning it's behind schedule. The other thing that's very interesting is when the lines cross, again, this is from my iPhone, so it's not the best camera, but the lines crossing the route mean that the bus that was supposed to be up here is actually only down here. So because these lines show where the bus is versus where it was supposed to be at that moment, the more that you see on a route where the lines are going in big swaths across, the more you know just by looking at those big swaths across that that line in general is running way behind schedule because the buses are not where they're supposed to be at that time along the route. But if you don't see a lot of lines crossing like this one or even these two, that means it's running pretty well on schedule with good headways.
Did anybody ask if there's so much blue, why don't they just change the schedule?
It was a lot of it was because of the snowbanks.
Yeah.
This was just before the rains in the middle, so they were having issues 2 weeks ago.
greater number of staff now than, when did you say they went up to the number of? Dave said that at one point there were only 2 dispatchers for the entire bus system, one for the north side.
That was like at the beginning of the rock.
Well, that's not that long. I mean, it's like 15 years ago. So that's not terribly long. But now there's 1 operator pretty much, I think, for every garage. I think there's 5 operators. Dispatchers. I keep doing operators. 5 dispatchers total. And that coupled with the new radio system, which allows people to talk directly to one bus, and that bus can talk directly back to the dispatcher. There's no everybody competing for a single frequency. It means that it's a lot more effective to get a message through. Is it quick, Barry?
It's quick. How do they, when you see something that's messed up, how can they actually control this and do something about it? And do they?
There's not a lot of flexibility they have because a bus still has to make every stop. Anybody who was there I believe there's really not much they can do other than address major incidents and, if there is an available operator.
They do active management when they can. I mean, they have supervisors that have the capability of making the call. I mean, so it is within their power to do whatever they can. But as Stefan said, I mean, there is a limit to what you can do.
I don't understand why the bus has to make every stop. If you're on the E line, they all can stop at Brigham Circle, get everybody off, wait for the next trolley. Why can't they do on a frequent service bus, a bus that runs every 10 minutes, say get off, take the next one?
It's not the policy that we operate under.
Going back a little bit to the thing, while we were actually there was a bunch of cars that were blocking a bus to get to the substation. I don't remember which. But
it was at Braintree. I'm sorry to interrupt. It was at Braintree.
Yeah.
I heard that too.
So one of the dispatchers called the transit police to get them to clear out the cars that were parked there.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you. And again, with the video, they can pull up anything. The subway people can pull up bus station cameras. The subway people can pull up cameras on the bus. The bus people can pull up cameras in subway stations. The new orange and red line cars and the new green line cars are all going to have cameras on board. So the idea is that anybody can see anything at any time because that's the best way to get everybody on the same page. Unless any questions about that, I've got 7:15. So
well, actually,
go ahead.
There was I seem to recall there was a member from the audience that used to ask about these drop bus trips regularly, and so I'm kind of wondering now if there might be some insights as to how that probably can be dealt with, Mr. Segel.
2 parts to answer that. One is I did ask Dave some kind of pointed questions along those lines. I'm not sure how much of it's public.
Okay.
But the other impression that I got is that between the dispatchers and the inspectors, there aren't many of them to be able to make decisions to take active steps to do something like you described you might do, or to short turn, like turn a bus mid-route to fill a gap somewhere, like just the amount of staff available to make those decisions and do that work. And we didn't talk about it, the systems to inform and support those things. I don't know that they're there.
And also, there's just a shortage of drivers. We just need to get more drivers. That's the main problem with the drop trips. It's just that there aren't enough drivers. And so
I'm curious to see more data about the drop trips. Like I'm curious to see the data. From what I understood in the meeting, he said there aren't many drop trips.
Right.
What does that mean, though?
Or as a percentage, and I don't remember.
I think it's a very small percentage.
It's like a little over. Yeah, it's about 1% system-wide, but that's across the system.
The same trip I went on about the 55. The 3 o'clock from Queensbury rarely happens. That's one drop trip. It should not be on the schedule. So if it's everything else on the 39 is great, the 43 is great, and then you've got one route that stinks, you can still be 1%, but it's 1% affecting certain people. I don't care, you drop a trip on the 39, you got another one in 10 minutes, or maybe not always. So, it's, anyway.
And if the 1% happen at peak of the peak,
right,
then that actually has a bigger impact than a random 1%.
Right,
Like those sorts of.
and that's what he said, right, is that the drop trips are more often at the peak.
They tend to be more at the peak. They tend to be more on routes like the 111, like the 77, key bus routes that are the only key bus routes in those garages, because when dropping a trip, dispatchers, that's another role that dispatchers take, is when a person bangs in sick or someone can't cover their run, they have to choose how it's all distributed, and they'll typically, instead of dropping a trip out of the Charlestown garage off a route that runs every 30 minutes or every 40 minutes, they will choose a route that runs very frequently, i.e. the 111, and that's why when you look at the rate of drop trips on routes like the 111, which is the only key bus route out of the Charlestown garage, or the 77, which is the only key bus route out of the Bennett garage, you see much higher rates of drop trips for those routes.
And the drop trips aren't evenly distributed in time with respect to the days of the week, right? And so you tend to have more on Fridays, right?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
But that would be a person get you more data. If you want more beyond what you just said.
Yeah, we're planning as part of the service plan when we present these, what we call the route profiles, which would be a summary of every single route. One of the sections that's going to be in there that hasn't been in there in previous years because the data hasn't existed is the rate to which trips are dropped on that route. So that we want to shine a light on this as part of the service plan to the extent that it hasn't been shown before.
I hope that will also be with time of day and day of week, not necessarily hour by hour, but AM, peak, midday.
And also, are there certain routes that trips are never dropped because somehow they find a bus from another route to fill in the gap? So that I'd like to see too.
Well, I mean, you would see there's certainly routes that run, have very high headways that don't run very often. We really try not to drop those trips because people, if it's running every 60 minutes, people are relying on that.
Yeah, if that's the case, I have no problem with that. But if it's something else, I would like to see that data.
It's your route, Karen.
What?
It's your route.
No, I understand. Anyway, I'm not going to go there, but I think there are certain routes in certain sections of the city that are not dropped. And I'd like to see it. So give me a list of all the routes, how many drop trips. If I see a route that has never had a drop trip and it runs every 15 minutes, it does not pass the smell test.
Maybe you need some super drivers who could be on call for Fridays and have a lot more route knowledge so they could kind of help plug some of the gaps.
Well, we do have what's called cover, which are the drivers that are not assigned a run, but they are on call for when people call out sick or something happens. And one of the things that Dave would tell you is that he is pushing to get more people assigned to cover.
That makes sense.
I didn't make that meeting, but I would be interested. Somebody said, I think last time I heard Dave Carney said they were short of bus drivers, they were recruiting, so that did come up, didn't it? Yeah, so what are you going to do if you don't have the drivers? You can't run the buses. And they can only work so many hours a week anyway, for some regulation.
Most of the alternatives, I mean, there's some issues with the lottery system, so we're pursuing that. We're going to try and have.
What are the issues with the lottery system?
The lottery's done like every 8 or 9 years, for a long period of time.
New recruits, you mean?
Yeah, and so and after a certain point, the bank, people in the lottery, well, the people in the bank, you get a smaller percentage of people from the bank, the older bank guests, because for whatever reason, you know, and so it would be ideal if the lottery would held less, more often, yeah, you know, and that seems to be more of an HR issue, and so I am getting some advice from Dave how to pursue that, along with Brad. So we're going to try and talk to someone from HR about what can be done, you know, to do the lottery more frequently.
That sounds great. I hate to point this out, but I've got about 7 minutes of 7. We don't have to change this conversation topic unless there is anybody who wants to bring up something about an external meeting or new business, old business.
I wanted to mention 2 things from the Fiscal and Management Control Board meetings.
Okay.
One is it's heartening that they're trying to manage their time better and have less death by PowerPoint and more focused presentations supported by written materials. I'm hoping that pays off. With my bus advocate hat on, I was interested. They're starting the budgeting process, and one of the things the general manager listed budget priorities, sort of qualitative priorities. A month ago, he had said that more and better bus service were priorities, but in the list that he presented yesterday, bus service wasn't listed. Whereas a line item was some sort of green line service improvement, and so to me that doesn't match. But that's an observation. Then a question is, I'm curious over the next few months how this group gets involved and talks about the budgeting.
Well, to the point of the general manager, in about 2 weeks, we should have a better idea of whether he'll be able to join us in February at this public meeting. And as soon as we get that confirmation, we'll probably actually, even regardless of that confirmation or not, we'll be soliciting questions and topics from all of you that we'll curate into a list to send to him so that he's not caught off guard and can prep a little bit for specific answers. So make that one of the ones that we make sure that we add to that list.
That wasn't the original plan, but maybe it is now. That wasn't the original plan, but I guess it is now. You know, so it was just going to be kind of intro, you know, but we can do that. You know.
Oh, right. But I don't mean that we would. Sorry, you're right. Yeah. I should rephrase that a little bit. Topics of interest to us, we can collect and let him know. But you're right.
For subsequent meetings.
For subsequent,
yeah.
Yes, you're right. I am overstating. I'm getting too specific on what we plan to do with him. We did plan. I'm very glad that you reminded me of that. Yes, we plan on being more of a meet and greet since it's our first time with him. Yeah. Thank you for that correction.
No problem.
Sorry I misspoke. But nonetheless, that's something that should go onto a list for pursuing with him.
Yeah, that was it. Thanks.
And we do budget and CIF. But you don't have to come. We can talk about it. You know.
We're not obligated to be out of the room at 7 o'clock, but we typically observe that for people who actually need to get somewhere. It's 5 of. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Any other questions about things that came up today? Or, I mean, I pulled up 2 things that I wanted to mention as a tag on to the operations committee report, which was that Dave Carney, the deputy GM for bus operations, said that the bus operators are actually finding the new partition walls on the 1900 series buses, that glass partition that swings out, they'll let them get in and out, but also has that small sliding part. Apparently it's very well received, and there's a bid going out very soon, or a bid going to be open to retrofit the buses that don't have those partitions with some variation of that. So it's apparently a huge success. And the thing that just one factor figure that Dave mentioned, the assault rate on bus operators can be as high as 1 or 2 every day, which does not make the news. Of course, assault can be anything from, you know, like spitting, or I think even threatening can be reported as an assault, but still, 1 or 2 bus operators every day. Yeah, if these partitions help, then that's a big deal.
And how many bus operators on a typical day are at work?
I don't know that. Rob, any guess off the top of your head?
No.
If you don't, it's fine.
I wouldn't even hazard a guess, sorry.
Okay.
Still, 1 is too many.
Exactly.
That's too many.
I am going to be sharing with everybody the list of names, phone numbers, ways to contact people. I didn't share that so far because I realized that if it's possible to have people log into Google and then access it as, you know, your Google identity, it's a little more secure. That way I don't have to have send everybody a link where anybody who has the link can edit this list or even like get to this list of phone numbers and addresses. So a quick question for everybody, just administrativia. Does anybody not have a Google account, like a Google sign-in? If you don't, it's fine. We can send you the link that'll let you edit just with the link. But if everybody has a Google account, anybody not have a Google account? Okay, well then that's great. So we will add everybody individually with your email address, and then that should allow you to get in. And then, like I said, that prevents anybody outside this group from getting access to our names and phone numbers and all that stuff.
You think with the hackers there'll be some Russian spies?
Well, it's better than just having a wide open link. And I'm also going to forward you the URL to the photos from the OCC in case you want to pull them up and zoom in more detail. That's what I was just showing you was a public album. Well, unless there's anything else, I mean, like I said, we're not obligated to disappear, but we'll call the meeting. I have a motion to close the official meeting as we're coming up on 7 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
And a second. Okay, thank you everyone. That concludes the official part of the meeting, and people watching on YouTube, thanks.
They'll mention something going into closed session.
Okay.